In one word, how would you sum up the previous decade or so of DC on film? I'm sure more than a few words come to mind, but for my money, nothing fits the bill quite like the word inconsistent. Inconsistent quality, inconsistent sequels, inconsistent box office performance, inconsistent leadership. Inconsistency has been the DCEU's biggest problem for much of the last decade. So naturally, a revamp is something that was always going to be on the horizon. There's just too much potential to work with here, and in DC's case, you don't want to necessarily jump the gun. You see what I did there? James Gunn, get it? Jumping the gun. Some of the most critically acclaimed comic books in history are under the DC banner, to say nothing of their award-winning animation division, which capitalized on the notion of a shared universe a full decade before Marvel made it the norm. While I'll never understand Warner Brothers executives not taking the time to make a phone call or walk down the street and reach out to Paul Dini or Alan Burnett or even Bruce Timm to consult on the first version of the DCU, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I'm not bitter. The best we can do is just focus on the future, because right now, for the first time in a long time, things at DC are looking hopeful. Their two biggest characters, arguably the pillars for the DC comic universe, are doing well in the world of film, and at the same time, no less. I'm speaking, of course, about Batman and Superman, specifically James Gunn's Superman and Matt Reeves' Batman. Both properties performed well at the box office, receiving generally favorable reviews from both critics and audiences alike, ultimately acting as a clean slate for the inconsistent
there's that word again.
CEU. So this is all good, right? Well, yes, mostly. It comes down to a question, really. Should Matt Reeves' Batman and James Gunn's Superman exist in the same shared universe? Well, it's a complicated question.
No!
Look, it's not lost on me. I understand why people would want something like this. Shared universes have an appeal that's hard to deny. They've made movies episodic, which was a stroke of genius for Marvel because you felt more obligated to see a movie you might not normally consider, just to catch a hint of what's next on the horizon in a post-credits scene or maybe a well-placed Easter egg. But somewhere down the line, as they raked in billions and billions of dollars, the idea of a shared universe was no longer a novelty. It became what was expected for these larger-than-life characters. And again, I get it, a shared universe done correctly works well, you can't argue with that. But you can also have success with standalone stories that don't fit within a large-scale continuity. A shared universe is something you can choose to have or not have. There's no rule against it or for it. I'm simply saying it doesn't need to be a requirement for a good film, particularly a good superhero film. Batman and Superman operating in the same universe done right is magic. But that's not what we have here. And if you're asking yourself why it won't work in this instance, the answer is simple. Tone. A shared universe needs a consistent tone to work well. Now, I'm not speaking in the sense of black versus white or dark versus light. That's a given. Batman works best as a darker character and Superman works best as a lighter character. And they actually work well together based off of that juxtaposition. No, the tone I'm speaking about is consistent with the reality these characters inhabit. Tone is arguably the most important part of a franchise that has multiple entries of the same character interpreted differently over time. Spider-Man, James Bond, Jurassic Park, even horror films like the Halloween franchise, all are dependent upon tone. It's how you differentiate one version from another, and it's how the teams that create these films leave their own mark, their own signature on the property. And coincidentally, there's no better example in film of this than the Batman movies. The tones of these films are so uniquely attached to the specifics of the iteration of Batman they are filming that they are often labeled by the people that directed them. The Burton films, the Schumacher films, the Nolan films, Snyder, Reeves, etc. And you don't really see this anywhere else. The MCU isn't necessarily by director, but the tone is a bit flexible and it does tend to change in big waves. Have you noticed the switch lately toward more brightly colored comic accurate costumes in the MCU? That's a change in tone, and it works because it's happening across the board collectively. Now, in saying that, certain versions of Batman operate in the James Gunn world much better than others. Conversely, Matt Reeves' Batman has a tone that's all its own. It's a noir-driven detective story and, like Christian Bale's Batman, exists in a somewhat realistic world. In fact, you could make the argument that Pattinson's Batman is a lot more realistic than Christian Bale's. Given the practicality of his Batmobile versus the Tumbler, Pattinson's Batman using a wingsuit to glide, versus Christian Bale's Batman who uses memory cloth, or Pattinson's Batcave essentially being a workshop versus Christian Bale's Batcave, which contains a platform he could have not possibly installed on his own, and whose only point was to rise out of the water for the purpose of ending the film on a metaphor. Get it? The Dark Knight rises because he's rising out of the water. And that's just it. Forcing a realistic tone into James Gunn's Superman is a bad idea. Gunn's Superman is larger than life. His world is quite literally a comic book world. We have aliens, not to mention an alien dog, a Green Lantern, and giant whatever the hell this thing is, roaming around the city, and it's not really a huge deal. It's all kind of the norm. Sure, they're scared at ground level, but they're also not shocked to see this meatball come to life and spit fire at Superman. For the people of Metropolis, it's just another day. And that's always been one of James Gunn's biggest strengths. He has a knack for giving credibility to the absurd. This is a man who made a bipedal raccoon and a talking tree, both of whom speak English, a billion-dollar franchise. And despite the ridiculous nature of his powers, he managed to make Polka Dot Man a sympathetic character. Until he didn't. It's a subtle act that allows audiences to drop their preconceived notions at the door and enjoy the ridiculous world they get to inhabit for 2 or 3 hours, hopefully 2. I don't like that movies are 3 hours nowadays. This, however, is not the world Pattinson inhabits. They don't mesh, and that inability to gel together is detrimental to the fabric of what this cinematic universe would be. For example, though it's not specifically stated, it's clear Pattinson's Batman is an incredibly gifted engineer. We don't know if he received anything from Wayne Enterprises like Bale did, but I think we can safely assume most, if not all of his tech, is custom made since he seems estranged from the company and his Batcave is riddled with tools. In this case, being able to design 2 grappling hooks that can repel a grown man who we would say is conservatively at least 200 pounds on top of whatever body armor he is wearing is a feat of engineering that few, if any, could accomplish. Just ask the Mythbusters how that went. This, coupled with the fact that he appears to be exceedingly intelligent in other disciplines,
He was alive when it was cut off. Ecchymosis. Around the wound.
is proof positive that Batman is incredibly intelligent within the Reeves universe. But here's the problem. That level of intelligence doesn't mean shit in a universe where Lex Luthor's creating pocket universes and robots with distinctly different personalities walk around assisting Superman. I mean, the T-spheres alone are light years beyond anything Pattinson could build himself. Gunn's Batman needs to be larger than life to stand side by side with Superman. He needs to be a comic book Batman. What's the difference? Get a good look at a realistic Batcave. Alright? Now look at one that shows no concern for realism. In Grant Morrison's run, for example, there was a rocket ship underneath Wayne Manor. And look, there is an argument that maybe Pattinson could build up to this. Batman Year One, for example, which is a fairly realistic take on the character, exists in the same world as The Dark Knight Returns. And if Batman 2 does introduce a supernatural component to the world, for example Mr. Freeze, then maybe Pattinson going into the Gunn universe could work. But I can only work with what's in front of me. And right now, putting Pattinson's Batman in James Gunn's universe would feel clumsy. Forced even. Which was the original issue with the DCEU. Too much was stuffed in too quick to keep pace with Marvel. For example, Doomsday should be an arc all his own. Ideally, he's a catalyst for a 2-part film, and instead he was shoved at the end of a movie, probably at the behest of some studio executive who thought it would be cool. But realism isn't just about the plausibility of the technology within the world they inhabit. Realism is about real-world stakes. It's socioeconomic at times, and those stakes for someone like Reeves' Batman are way different than James Gunn's Superman. Batman, for example, needs to figure out in the sequel how to get Gotham out of water, both literally and figuratively. Maybe the government doesn't help, it's not the first time we've seen them abandon Gotham, so he'll more than likely work tirelessly to the point of collapse, trying to help people and more than likely working to rebuild it all through his vast wealth. In the midst of this, people will try to reclaim the city, take advantage of allocated funds, criminals, corrupt politicians. It's intricate. However, it loses its intricacy if he exists in the same world as a Green Lantern who could empty the city out in a matter of minutes with a neon green submersible pump. You take away from the stakes and all the stories that could be told go away when you unnecessarily combine tones like this. The scale of the corruption, the redemption, the conflict are all out the window when you apply meta-human logic to a world inhabited by humans trying to solve human problems in a human way. An interdimensional imp would be a major concern for Pattinson's Batman. That's assuming he knows just what the hell he's looking at. For Superman, though,
It was Tuesday.
it's not even worth him getting off his super ass. Tone matters. John Wick is a badass, but I don't know how he would do in the world of Harry Potter. James Bond has been kicking ass for decades, but he wouldn't last very long against a Jedi. And even though they exist in the same universe in comic books and film and animation, it would be a disservice to Pattinson's Batman to stick him in the well-constructed, yet respectively ridiculous world of James Gunn's DCEU. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying I don't want Batman in this universe at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I want him in James Gunn's universe, and I want the most off-the-wall version of the character imaginable. James Gunn's Batman should be larger than life, ripped straight out of a comic book. The kind of Batman that chews kryptonite-laced gum and manages to spit it into the face of a Jokerized Superman who just managed to pull him out of the Justice Buster armor. Or maybe the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, a Batman who acts as a backup personality should Bruce Wayne ever lose his mind and walks around in a costume made of garbage. And at the end of the day, Pattinson's not that kind of Batman. He has his own niche. He doesn't beat up parademons, he beats up incels. And that's fine. There's room for both. At the end of the day, all I'm saying is just because they could potentially go together, doesn't mean they should go together. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do me a favor, like and subscribe, and until next time, same bat time.